Another thing that I'm calling trust math. What is the trust math of patient engagement, digital health, consumer health? And here's an example. AI plus a collaborative clinician response is greater than the clinician alone. And trust is when we have AI plus the clinician and using their collaborative response. So there's just this concept that if there's not trust between the patient and the clinician, the relationship is damaged, the loyalty is damaged.
Try to fix the current system or reimagine something new? Will healthcare ever serve consumers just like me and you? The power's in our hands, but every side's gotta come together. We want the newer generations to get something better. Until we flip the script and talk about what gets prevented. Until we see the changes permanent as if we meant it. Until healthcare is finally consumer-centered. We've got a lot to rap about.
Welcome back to the leading podcast about how consumer health works. We spotlight how healthcare is being designed, marketed, and delivered from the consumer point of view, and profile leaders who are championing the move to preventive care. If you want to understand healthcare both as a builder or operator and as a consumer yourself, this is the place for you. Here's what's going down today. First up, I recap the July Think Tank chat where the RAP community discussed the one-year anniversary of the CMS Health Tech Ecosystem, exploring where government-facilitated interoperability efforts translate into real patient impact and areas where they still have a ways to go. If you're checking out this show, you'll enjoy these monthly open-ended forums where everyone has a voice. So do yourself a favor and sign up at healthcarerapcommunity.com. It's all free. If you can't attend, you can still join the community and you'll receive the recap straight in your inbox. So again, that's healthcarerapcommunity.com. After the recap, Adam Cherrington returns to point out examples where he's seeing the voice of patients and consumers being included in healthcare and other trends he's spotting in his recent advisory work. I'm Jared Johnson. Let's get it.
Flavor of the week.
The RAP community hosts monthly think tank chats, which are highly interactive conversations where everyone has a voice. Our July think tank focused on the one-year anniversary of the CMS Health Tech Ecosystem, exploring where government-facilitated interoperability efforts translate and where they still have a long ways to go. We talked about 5 key topics. First, change management continues to stand in the way of true progress for providers and health systems. A real example was the staff at one clinic that covered a check-in kiosk with a sign that says, "Use the front desk," because they lack change management training. Second, wearables can motivate meaningful lifestyle changes and make personal health data more actionable, but notification fatigue and questionable benchmarks can undermine their value. Third, consumers are beginning to use AI tools such as ChatGPT Health and Perplexity Health to connect and interpret wearable data, medical records, lab results, and imaging findings, which sometimes reduces anxiety and helps them ask better questions. Fourth, healthcare could use a version of Plaid that can securely connect fragmented health data sources without storing the information itself. And fifth, trust remains the central requirement for adoption, particularly among younger consumers who are reluctant to share health data without a clear personal benefit. We also rounded things out with some open-ended questions to ponder. At 1 year, where has the health tech ecosystem demonstrated substantive progress, and where is it still falling short? Can AI-generated health insights be clinically accepted for patient-facing apps, and where do providers make the most sense in that experience? And finally, is personal health optimization creating social trade-offs? Join our next think tank on August 28th at 11 a.m. Pacific or 2 p.m. Eastern. Visit healthcarerapcommunity.com to RSVP. All right, let's get into the flow. I want to welcome Adam Cherrington back. We've done this. We're going to start doing this on a little bit more regular basis. So welcome back to the show.
Thanks, Jared. Awesome to see you.
Yeah, it's truly just an excuse for us to catch up and, have something on the calendar to say, like, let's make sure we touch base. So we'll just happen to let the rest of the industry in on our conversation,
Yeah, I learn from you every time, and it's fun to connect and share what we're hearing.
So we had you on a few weeks ago, and that was kind of the introduction to a couple of ideas. One was the thought of where patient centricity and consumer centricity, patient experience, where the patient voice being included actually leads us to. It was a really enlightening conversation. We kind of pulled up our little Venn diagram. So if folks haven't had a chance to check out that episode, highly recommend that. Definitely watch it on YouTube because we have a little visual associated with that. But we covered just really from a high level, the dialogue that you hear a lot tends to fall in the camp of, let's talk about patient experience and what's included in that. And then on the show, we talk a lot about, the consumer voice, the consumer point of view. So what's included in that? And the spoiler alert, if you haven't seen that episode, we definitely came to the conclusion that this is a nearly completely intersecting overlap, right? So we're talking about so many of the same things. We're talking about access and pricing and convenience and communication and connectivity. So a lot of the same things. And so one of our conclusions from that episode was, let's not get caught up in, is this a patient experience thing or a consumer experience thing? We're like, let's just focus on the solutions. Like, let's look at that. And so I learned a lot from that episode. And the other thing we mentioned was some of the advisory work that you're focused on now. And I kind of wanted to start by checking in on that work and kind of how things are going. And then what we wanted to try today was a slightly different format. But yeah, how have things been going? What type of stage are you in now as you get going with your advisory work?
Yeah, I appreciate it. And, it's been an adventure to start your own thing. And I'm several months into aligned health advisory. The goal is really to focus on that concept of alignment and how can we help vendors align with their clients, their provider clients and prospects, and how do we help providers align with patients and consumers. And then, Jared, I don't know if you know the word syzygy. It sounds like synergy at Sizzler, but it's a real science word of alignment of three celestial bodies. And some wise colleagues said, don't name your company syzygy. Nobody knows what that means. But the point is, if we can align patients with providers, with vendors, that's where we'll see momentum and progress. So we do executive education and coaching on the vendor side. We do patient assessments and insights on the provider side, and always hoping to bring that voice to the patient. So, just some things that I'm learning. It's so fascinating to me how patients are using AI. Later on, I want to talk about workarounds that I'm seeing. Patients have to design their own workarounds to make healthcare work for them, which I hope we can improve and find a way to minimize that. So the exact approach is the correct path, and patients don't feel like they have to design their own journey. But as patients say, hey, I don't fully trust AI, but it's more convenient and it's giving me what I need today, they're using it like they do trust it. And so that's been just a fascinating learning. Another thing that I'm calling trust math. What is the trust math of patient engagement, digital health, consumer health? Too often we see that, and here's an example, AI plus a collaborative clinician response is greater than the clinician alone. And trust is when we have AI plus the clinician and using their collaborative response. So there's just this concept that if there's not trust between the patient and the clinician, the relationship is damaged, the loyalty is damaged. And so really starting to scratch the surface on what does that mean? So much of healthcare is the AI tools that organizations are using to engage to the patient. But there's a whole other side of that, the key stakeholder, what is the patient doing? So if you can't tell, I'm jazzed about it. There's a lot to learn, and there's quite a bit going on with the patient side of the AI revolution.
Yeah, I'm just going to start calling this Picking Adam's Brain, like this whole series that we do, and it's worth it. And so, okay, I think I found the right word, the right spelling of syzygy. Is this it? SYZYGY?
Yeah. Cool
Okay.
word that nobody knows. And so I felt like, let's teach the concept, but it's alignment. And that's what I love. So good job finding that word. And I appreciate you sharing the spelling.
Well, and whoever gave you the insight to maybe not name the advisory, that may have been good advice. So I think that's great, because you're explaining the concept itself, and
for sure
take away from that. You never know. I feel like that, and then I can name off all of the random sounding names of Fortune 100 companies, that we're like, on their own, but like everyone knows them. So
right.
so
And
who knows?
And healthcare is known for that, the unique spellings of words, and right, there's so many examples.
It's great. It's great. Okay, then the other thing I wanted to respond to, and then we'll get into kind of our, our format today, was the thought of the work, like you said, the work that's always to be done on the patient's side. No matter what, there's work to be done on your side, and I think that the journey into consumer experience, consumer centricity, all the focus areas that we've had on the show over the years, personally, has just been a reminder to me that, like, if I ever expected someone else to do all the work and to be the quarterback, I'll always be disappointed. Like, no one else will be as interested in my health as me. So I just need to take that on and accept that. And once I accepted that, it was probably a couple of years ago, that I just realized, I'm like, all these changes I want to push for, I want to keep pushing for them, but at the same time, I want to learn what's available myself. Like, what work can I do? And you mentioned how AI has changed that scope, and it's not just accelerated it has literally changed it. When we really can plug into a chatbot, an LLM of any kind, and say, like, here's what I know so far, it's a more trusted source of just the first step of that next opinion, that second opinion. Hey, I'm not happy with the answers I'm getting so far, either from my own research and or my responses from my provider. There's something, like, I want to trust my body. Like there's something going on here. It's another source for answers that's more than supercharged. Like, we just don't even have words to describe how AI is changing the work to be done for each individual patient. And so, it's always worth, to me, just reiterating, like, the starting point is just acknowledging, yep, you're the quarterback, you're the person in charge. How much can you help yourself by self-educating, by partnering with good sources, finding good resources, whether they're apps, whether it is ChatGPT, Claude, you name it, Gemini, you pick, your favorite one, or use more of them. We'll use more than one, but just taking on that responsibility, and then honestly evaluating and seeing what we can do now. It is changing by the minute. Of what's possible.
Yeah, what a world we're in. And isn't that interesting how that compares to 50 years ago, when it was, hey, doctor knows best. You need to, and there's still some generational differences there, where we, certain generation, I'll just say my parents' generation still tend to gravitate towards what does the doctor say, and that's gospel. And I'm not saying it's not. I'm just saying we also bring many other perspectives on our own accord. And I think you're right. You have to be the quarterback. You have to take ownership of that. What are all the meds I'm taking? Who are the other doctors I'm seeing? What's the other processes I'm going through, recommendations, et cetera. And I feel for those clinicians that have to summarize all of that within seconds. And hopefully these tools are helping them with that, because that is super challenging. We're in an economy where there's a little bit of AI resistance. You hear about some of the college graduations that have happened, and people booing when they talk about AI. And there's a part of the community that's saying, hey, I'm going to resist this a little bit. However, I can get answers in the next 10 seconds, and access is trumping trust. And so there's something to be said about that. And I'm excited to keep learning about that and work with organizations to understand, hey, what is your response when a patient comes in and they're well informed and they've used LLMs and they have ideas and they want to ask questions? How are you addressing that? It's another flavor of the Ask Dr. Google. And I think the response of the clinician is going to be increase or decrease trust with their own patients.
Yeah, and I want to point out how you responded to one of those items I just brought up. It was with empathy for clinicians. That's so vital here. We're not trying to bypass, we're not trying to say yes to everything that's coming out of ChatGPT or Claude. Yes, and no to everything that's come from the provider. It's like, we have empathy for the clinical teams that have, up until this time, done what they've been asked to do, given in the system that they work within. And many of them do try and work to influence change and improvement, and they notice things. So it's not, I mean, I don't know any clinicians personally who are like, yeah, I'm just not going to try as hard today, or I don't have my patient's best interest in mind. I mean, like, we should be mindful of the good intentions here. That's served me well in life, of like assuming good intentions.
For sure.
So yeah. So okay. So our format today was, or our goal was to point out areas where we are seeing the patient or consumer's voice being included. And this is probably something I think we'll come back to regularly.
Yeah.
Today I want to just see what you're seeing. I found a couple examples myself, and we can debate whether that's actually is what I'm seeing or not in the couple I have. Um, do you want to get started on one? We can just kind of go back and forth. I think we just have a couple examples each.
Yeah, let's do it. Number one, love the question and hope we keep asking that, the two of us on this format, but also as an industry, let's always ask that. A patient's needs are different than what the health system's needs and expectations are versus a vendor versus payer. And I think the reason we bypass it is we say, well, I'm a patient, so I know what patients want. Kind of true, but not totally true. So, and Jared, I wish I had 50 examples and we had to take 10 hours to give all the details, but the reality is it's still growing, still a challenge, we still need more examples. So to no shock, I'll give you some basic ones that you can probably guess. PFACs, Patient Family Advisory Councils, still a primary source of ways to include patients in discussions. Some of those are more meaty than others. Some are true seats at the table. Others are maybe like the mission statement on the wall. Hey, we do this. Check it out. We have a PFAC. I want to applaud anybody that's doing anything because it's progress. But I still hear about that. That's probably the number one way organizations are trying to include patients. And then there's a whole industry around patient experience data. Your audience will know better than most what that already looks like. The CAP surveys have been around forever. There's more qualitative insights that we're gaining, and LLM are helping us understand intent and just from the inflection in your voice and things like that. So there's some cool ways there. That's probably high level. And then, I'll call these top of funnel insights. There's always national publications and research efforts to find out, hey, what do consumers think about healthcare? I like that, but I think we're not far from the day when we can get to the specifics. What does Jared Johnson need and expect, and his family and community? What are they looking for? Because we are different. There will be many similarities, but my goodness, you think of other industries where they can get that specific and they do know details about me. And healthcare's not there, but I hope it gets there. So I'm very curious what you've seen. What are some examples that are brewing up for you?
Yeah, well, I will echo the thought of this wasn't a list that easily came to mind, and I had to trim it down, and we have 50 each. This was it was an interesting thought, and I think this illustrates again the complementary nature of, again, you and I spent a whole episode talking about how when we're talking about patient expectations or patient experience versus consumer experience, how similar and aligned those are, and very overlapping, like 80% plus, overlapping. And the reason to keep having both sides of that included in our dialogue is that they just usually mean different things to different people, especially when you bring clinicians in. A clinician will often just tune out the moment you say the word consumer at all, because that desanctifies their relationship in their mind with the patient. So it's always worth just mentioning that, I think, in a lot of our conversations. And so I try to think a couple of different ways, like different sides of the industry. One was the consumer side, which usually the things we think about are wearables, other medical like devices, and then things like GLP-1 therapies and
Sure.
even metabolic management and weight loss apps and services. The one I was going to focus on was from Aura, and what it just reminded me of is consumer health companies really do have a different set of standards by which they are judged. And one of those is their closeness to the customer. So they don't act the same as if because they have medical advisors, they have medical leaders, they have clinical leaders, but they're not practicing medicine. And so the things they spend their time on to measure success and grow do tend to be more consumer centric. And so I think there's a lesson to be learned there. There's also like the reality of they will always be different in a few different ways. So when we're talking about an Oura ring, that is something that is built and developed in a very different way than a medical service. So we're just keeping that in mind. There's an intersection, but the one I'll point out is Aura's Health Radar. It was a service that they just launched a few weeks ago. They announced it. If we have any Aura users listening or watching, the Aura app has a feature called Symptom Radar that launched in 2024. And this is kind of the next gen of that is kind of how I understood it. And the thought is that, okay, an Oura ring is gathering data about you in the background passively, especially when you sleep, but actually all day long is what some people don't even realize. And so it's acknowledging the fact that your body gives signals all day long, 24/7, about everything from stress and readiness to other, just actions. So it's not just here are your insights about when you're working out or actively exercising. It overlays that on to just lots of other layers of data. And so this Health Radar is just an AI powered health coach. And I don't want to undersell it because I do think it's a significant upgrade, but it was based on what they were able to see from consumer data from their customers already. And so they're very careful to walk the line of like, we don't want this to be an FDA regulated device. Whoop just learned that the hard way. They just had their FDA warning letter cleared just a few weeks ago that was given to them last year. And that was related to Whoop's blood pressure monitoring. And that was just it's very clear, like Aura's trying to walk this line, right? So they're not saying we can predict your health. What they are saying is we can tie a lot of things together more in the background. It doesn't take any more effort from you, but we're going to surface actually some of those insights that a lot of apps have always promised about just your day-to-day life. So they're talking so far upstream, well before you have symptoms of something more serious. So just having something in the background, it's literally just a new feature in the app. Again, it's called Health Radar, but it does track, I mentioned blood pressure on the Whoop side. This tracks cardiovascular signals overnight, so related to your blood pressure. So it's just, at the end of the day, just giving you a little bit more of a visibility into your health. You don't have to be, speaking from experience, you do not have to be a professional athlete to use one and to benefit from those insights. There's something to be said for that. And the last point I'll mention on that is just the thought of, I think, as I've learned on my own journey here of like what not to ask the industry to do, what can we influence the industry to do, what just doesn't make sense to try to force down their throats. I'm learning as I go too, right? Like I don't expect my doctor, my provider to be able to track. Like I don't expect to be able to hand them access to my Oura Ring, to my Apple Watch, a couple of other apps that I use, and say, go make sense out of all this. Like coming back to me, like me as a quarterback, like it hasn't always been easy to do that on my own, but I'm not going to sit here and say like, that's my provider's job. Why aren't they doing that? Well, we can go into all the reasons. They don't get reimbursed for that. That's more pajama time is all it is. The data isn't structured for them to actually get anything out of it. We can keep going all over these things. So it's just illuminating other things along my own journey. I feel like as I learn about features and services like this, that I'm just like, it's just one cool new thing to add to my own visibility and my own health. And, if it becomes more than that, then cool. But I don't have to try to expect something unreasonable out of my provider as a result. I don't know if that makes sense.
Cool example. And, it's, I hope the next time you ask me that question, I've got a lot more to share because it is rare on the patient side. But it's cool when you have examples like what you just gave. So, what I want to say is that I'm hearing patients are involved in product development. That on the vendor side, they're testing it out thoroughly. I think some of that happens, but it's not broadcast much, or it's not common. I hope we start to see examples of something like a chief patient, and I'll leave it just like that. Who's the chief patient that we have to run every process by, every procedure, every product by with health systems? And then I mentioned my own firm. We're starting to interview patients, how they're using AI and getting there. If I may, I've got some ideas where else it could go, if that's helpful. I just published 250 ideas to improve patient experience. And a lot of colleagues in the industry, including yourself, Jared, you gave some great ideas. I appreciate that. In conjunction with the 250th anniversary of the country, I thought, what are some practical things we could be doing to really involve patients and improve the experience? Had a few people say, let's pay patients for their time. Let's treat them like a trusted advisor. Grace Cordovano and Erica Hansen-Brown had similar thoughts there. Chris Ross, former CIO at Mayo Clinic, said, let's engage more with the village around the patient. And I major health journey that my family's been on, I know that has to be the case. You have to have the other stakeholders involved. And one of my favorite ideas was have patients write patient education. And I thought that was genius. That's from Samira Daswani. And Samira, I hope I'm saying your name right. I just know you from the industry, but what a cool concept. Write it in a way that makes sense to patients and pay them for their time and their expertise there. So, there's just some practical things we can be doing to make sure that patient is represented, included, and treated like a real partner. I think we have a mutual friend in Erica Olinsky, and she said, most patient and family advisory councils don't give participants real voting power, and we can change that. At times it's a token membership, if you will. Right. But give them some voting power, give them some authority, make them a chief patient and say, hey, we need you to review this. So I think there's a lot we can and should do. And I hope next time we have this conversation, I've got too many examples to share.
Yeah. The list of 250, by the way, I highly recommend if people have not had a chance to see that, to read through it, is just full. You only had time to share a couple of examples there, but there are literally hundreds in that list. Oh, remind our subscribers here, like what's the easiest place for them to find that? You've published it on LinkedIn. Is that the best place for them to find it?
Yeah. Go to LinkedIn. You can follow me or follow Aligned Health Advisory, but several articles there. We've done 6 articles already. The last one is about to go live. All 250 ideas organized by the patient journey. What can I do to help them find care and find information and improve communication? So it's intended to be practical ideas that any organization can implement right away. Not, hey, let's create a teleport pad so I can go to the doctors within seconds. Not that kind of sci-fi stuff, but just, what can I do today? How can we make this improve right now? And what was really fun is including patients. Taking my own medicine that I recommend, we've got to include patients in their perspective. So got some really cool ideas that way.
Well, the sci-fi stuff is so much fun, though.
Hey, if you've got a teleport pad, I'm all for it. I'd love to bounce around the world or the universe, but I'll be your first call, Jared, when you get that.
Very good. All right. You're on. You're signed up here. Well, that's a great place for us to wrap today. I think it's worth just mentioning this will be an ongoing dialogue. And if anything, today is encouraging me to look harder for examples of where it looks like the consumer and patient voice is being included. And same thing. I hope to come back next time and just be like, I've found so much more this time. And it's just more prevalent and it was easier to find. It makes more sense. And it's not sci-fi, it's all practical things that we can do right now. There's nothing stopping us. So I always appreciate that vibe that you share here on the show. I mean, that's so important. We're trying not to be cynical about it. We're trying to be productive and keep an ongoing conversation that leads to solutions, that leads to improvement here in these areas. So as usual, looking forward to doing this again. But thanks for joining us today and give us a lot to think about, Adam.
Thanks so much, Jared. Love what you're doing. Thanks.